Bonjour, monsieur. Welcome to Paris.
Show yourself, Dr. Jekyll.
Seems that memory of yours is getting worse, Van Helsing. The name is Hyde, remember?
This game does have plenty of cutscenes and voice acting, but a lot of the dialogue is also going to be Van Helsing thinking to himself with silent text. There are a rather remarkable amount of things to examine considering it's an action game. Here's where we learn to double jump. We can only double jump by pressing up against a wall and pressing X again after our first jump. So yeah, it's basically a wall jump, but with more options for you. We can use our grapple gun only at set destinations with big red markers, but we'll get more to that later.
Are you still on that pathetic little quest? The one you think will reveal your past?
My past is none of your concern.
Wouldn't you like to meet the demons of your mind? You're nothing but an empty puppet of the church. A marionette on a string. Let me help you. After all, I am a man of science.
You are a murderer.
Ah, the pot calls the kettle black.
I destroy only what is evil. You are wanted for the killing of 12 innocent men, 6 women.
4 children, 3 goats, and a rather nasty massacre of poultry. Yes, I'm well aware of my past. A man has to eat, doesn't he?
Not when he's dead.
Hyde is one of the easiest bosses to have ever been a boss battle. If you know how to dodge, you're already ahead of the curve. He has a jumping attack and a slam attack, but he telegraphs both of those very well, to the point that if we say we're to back up against this bell, we could still dodge him at point-blank range. But yes, this is barely a tutorial, it's only here because it was here in the movie.
I think you'll find the view from here most enchanting.
We need you to go to the east, to the far side of Romania. 450 years ago, a Transylvanian knight named Valerius the Elder allowed his son, Vladislaus Dragulya, to commit a great evil upon the world. As a result, a terrible curse was cast upon his house. A curse that cannot be lifted until the vampire is driven from their land. 9 generations have perished trying to break it. Only one survives. The Princess Anna. If she dies, the spirits of her ancestors shall never enter the gates of St. Peter. They will be forever damned. When we found you crawling up the steps of the Vatican half dead, it was clear that you had been sent to do God's work. God is not to blame for your past sins. But if you pass this test of faith, He will help you rediscover your past. Transylvania is a land plagued by tragedy. And Vaseria, a village where you will encounter the dead far more than the living. Do not be distracted by these wayward spirits, my son. Find the village fountain quickly, for that is where the path to Dracula begins.
Well, now we know where we need to go, but what do you say we take a look around first? Yep, that's a corpse. Our double jump lets us get to some pretty interesting places, provided there's a wall nearby, for example, onto this roof. These green things we're picking up, in case you didn't read it earlier, allow us to upgrade ourselves in various ways and buy items. We're gonna only be doing the upgrading thing with them, though. Buying items is kind of a waste. This game has a lot of goofy secrets, like hitting that weather vane makes more power glyphs pop out for us. You don't get anything for doing that besides those power glyphs, but it's a cute detail, I guess. If we platform across these roofs and over to this tower, we reach our first hidden grapple point. Not that one, but this one over here. You can see our grapple point indicator flashing in the upper right. That means there's a place to grapple even if we can't see it. And this purple thing is half of a life container. If we get 2 of those, our life increases permanently. Those are all the secrets we can currently access in this area, and we're not coming back to 100% it later, so don't get any ideas about that. We're still going to look at all the secrets we can possibly find on our way through, we're just not going to backtrack. As that little pop-up was trying to say earlier, breaking open breakable objects gives us more power glyphs. We can't lock onto breakable objects like we can on enemies for obvious reasons, so breaking them with our blades is actually quite an exercise. Right, so let's go see what that ghost fella wanted. I'm sure it was something important. This area is basically the tutorial for the game's puzzles, if you want to call them that. We see something that is impeding our progress, like the lack of a bridge. We see something we can use to fix that issue, and we see how to activate it. A great deal of the puzzles in this game are going to follow this pattern, though sometimes they span multiple rooms. The camera is indeed fixed, in case you couldn't tell yet from the game so far. The fixed camera is actually very important to the gameplay. It's never really a hindrance. Usually I don't have problems with fixed cameras in games, and this is one of those games. The fixed camera doesn't do anything bad. It can make platforming and finding secrets more difficult, but that's kind of the point of the camera, isn't it? It wouldn't really be hidden if you could see it. The only time it can really be tricky is, well, right now is a perfect example. When you try to swing across something, you need to press the analog sticks in the correct direction when you let go of the hook, or else you go flying into a pit. And the correct direction can sometimes be a little up in the air. Welcome to the most common enemies in the game, the Fell Spirits. Well, the most common enemies early in the game, anyway. We can take them out very easily with our pistols by locking on and strafing. They have, I believe, 4 attacks of note. They can fire a light projectile out of their chest at us, which moves fairly fast. But we can dodge that projectile simply by strafing left or right. And try not to dodge into it. They have Vomit, which has a rather impressive range, but only goes straight forward. They tend to use it at a middle distance, and it hurts the most out of all their attacks. They have a swipe attack that they use at very close range, which reaches deceptively far, but you can dodge back to get away. And there is one more, but I'll save that one for when we see it. All you really need to know right now is that there's a pickup right here, and I keep jumping up and down to try and make the circle button's detection work. This pickup will refill our health if we use it from the inventory. I'm going to try and use as little items as humanly possible. So hey, welcome to the town. The game tries to tell us about our melee combos that we can use with our blades, and I'm not sure why it does that. The only combo we have right now is knocking enemies into the air and then juggling them while they're up there. Melee combat is, well, it's a thing in this game. It's useful for some enemies, but most of the time we're going to be sticking with our guns, of which we will have a large variety. This game is the 3D equivalent of very old shoot-'em-ups. We can thankfully hold down the shoot button instead of smashing it, otherwise, you know, your fingers would fall off halfway through the second level. This room gives you a ridiculous amount of room to maneuver, so there's nothing to worry about as far as the enemies are concerned. You might notice that sometimes Van Helsing glows purple. We'll get to why that is in the next room. You know this game drew comparisons to Devil May Cry? I can understand why people would be disappointed if that's what they thought of when they came and bought it. It's still very good for what it is, I think. So if we come up this staircase, we make more skeletons spawn, or rather Fell Spirits as they're called. We just want to move back and forth, up and down the staircase. We don't have as much room to move here, so if there's a skeleton in the way of where we want to step, we can get rid of him really quickly with our blades. Make sure you lock on first, though. You saw Van glow purple again, and if you look to the right of our HUD, next to our gun and our blade... Oh dear, it went away. Next to our gun and our blades up there, there's another meter. By pressing L1, we can expend that meter to use our alternate fire, which is a stronger version of our bullets. It kills enemies way faster, and it's especially useful during boss battles. And you can fill up the alternate fire meter simply by killing enemies the normal way. Enemies do drop power glyphs, which are those green things we use to buy upgrades for ourselves, but only when they're killed. The thing is that you have to walk over them to pick them up, which means you have to walk into enemy fire. And whenever you have to walk into enemy fire, that's what your blades are for. That or dodging in and dodging back out quickly. By examining any of the doors in this village, we can see that there are villagers here. They're not all dead. They're just not hanging outside right now, probably because of all the deathly skeletons and whatnot. When you re-enter some rooms, you'll find that the enemies have respawned, like this one. The area we just came out of was an extra area, so now we're going to go forward. That extra area didn't have much in it, but it did get us more experience points. But yes, do remember so you're not constantly staring at the HUD. Whenever Van is glowing purple, that's when we're using our alternate fire on enemies. That pop-up is telling us how to use finishing moves, which are a limited number of vials we keep right below our health bar. They kill most normal enemies instantly. We're not going to use them very much. In this room, the enemies are all huddled together in this circle. Obviously, just stay on the outside of the circle until you see an opening to grab the power glyphs, then roll in and back out. Just whatever you do, don't stand in the middle of the circle, basically. You've hopefully noticed that our alternate fire refills very quickly, so it's actually a very reliable method if you're in a pinch, and we're going to use it to save our asses during a lot of boss battles. Because as you'll notice, Van Helsing's health bar right now is very, very tiny. We can trigger some optional skeletons after we destroy these breakable objects by jumping down into the pit next to the stairs. Again, they're completely optional, but, you know, why not show them off anyway? You don't have that much room to move here, so I recommend staying along the back wall and tracing it with your back. Just keep moving diagonally along the back wall, and they shouldn't be able to hit you. And you'll find that there's not too many of them, but that's because there's a second group that spawns here. Make sure you only trigger one group at a time, otherwise it'll be a lot harder. The next group is over here. You have a lot more room to maneuver from this angle, so just, take your time. Plug away at them. They should be the opposite of a threat. The reason we're fighting so many extra enemies is because we want at least 2,000 power glyphs before we leave. We want those for a very important reason. This area is our first introduction to fighting on multiple planes. Now normally we want the upper ground so we can drag the enemies across a staircase up at us, where they have a hard time shooting us. But if the dip is big enough, then it's disadvantageous to be on the upper ground because you simply can't reach them. And if you want to get anything done, you have to move down where they are. This obviously has the downside of the enemies on the upper plane being able to shoot you a lot easier, but look, do you want to kill them or not? Because sometimes you have to bite the bullet. It may seem like a good idea to switch between planes if you're being surrounded. That's a good idea in some circumstances, but not if you have to jump for it. Your jump is only good as a dodge in certain situations. Pardon me breaking all these boxes, but like I said, we want as many power glyphs as we can possibly get. You can totally go back to areas with respawning enemies and then grind there for power glyphs if you really want to. That was a very dramatic introduction for a gun that we're not going to be using all that much. In this area they give you plenty of room to back away from your enemies over here, but that tends to push them off of the camera screen. And pushing them off of the camera screen is bad for a couple of reasons. One, you want to see where the power glyphs drop so you can actually reach them in time. And two, you can't see the enemies telegraph their attacks if they're not on the screen. This isn't a problem for most attacks. A lot of the projectiles move slowly enough that they can be dodged regardless of whether the enemy is on the screen. But with the way the room layout and boss fights are designed, I'm positive that they intended the camera angle to be part of the challenge. You have to keep the enemies on screen to know what you're doing. Alternatively, if you have enough alternate fire, you can just back as far away as possible and plug away at them with that, but then you miss out on all the power glyphs. Oh, I forgot to mention, because it hasn't been relevant until now, those red glyphs that the enemies drop, those are health, and they're very important. The enemies drop red glyphs way less frequently than green ones, because, well, they don't want the health pickups to be too frequent. There's usually one red health glyph in a single group of enemies. Well, at least one. Depending on the size of the group, there can be multiple. We can just shoot these guys like a shooting gallery and keep them up against the back wall. They're really no danger to us where they are right now. You'll notice that, as I promised, the melee is not playing a super important part here. And that's okay with me. After I found out that this game was a shoot-'em-up, that was fine. Just don't try and play it like a hack and slash, for the love of God. I cannot imagine the frustration an individual would go through trying to play this game using just melee attacks. I'm not sure it's even possible. We're going to search all these breakable objects to see if we can break the 2,000 mark, and then after that we're going to jump into the window and get our shotgun.
You there. You all right? Are you hurt, sir?
This guy has 3 main attacks you should be worried about. He has a punch combo, he has a grab, and he has a stomp. The stomp you can dodge out of the way if you're back far away enough. Just dodge away from it, not toward it. But usually the only way to avoid getting hit by the stomp is if you jump instead. Like that. The shotgun deals the most damage to this guy. Your pistols deal piss for damage against him. If he tries to combo you, just keep dodging backward until the combo is over, and if he grabs you, just smash the square button as fast as possible and he'll let you go. The shotgun deals more damage to him the closer you are, but there's no reason to get super close and risk getting the shit pummeled out of you, so just stay a good distance away. Make sure he stays on the screen, though. It's a good first boss, and it teaches you that sometimes you need to jump to dodge enemy attacks, in addition to just, you know, dodging.